During the Second World War, the speed and surprise offensive into France by the German forces shocked the world. In only 6 weeks, the Wehrmacht and the Luftwaffe blitzkrieg caused the collapse and surrender of the French army. One of the factors responsible for the victory can be the use of a rather disturbing performance-enhancing drug, Pervitin, otherwise known as methamphetamine. In today's video, we will cover the use of this drug in the Third Reich, uncover some of the truths and myths surrounding the drug, and some disturbing examples of its use. It is perhaps helpful to start with a situation in 1933. The National Socialists managed to take power and began their Third Reich. The prohibition of the use of recreational drugs was not something that was of primary concern for the Nazis. Many of the Weimar Republic's laws on drug use remained in place, and addicts were not targeted in the Nazis' racial hygiene and eugenic laws. However, this was not the case for those addicted to alcohol, who often ended up in concentration camps. This could be due to the Germans' attitudes to taking drugs being fairly liberal and the consequences of World War I. Many injured soldiers had developed addiction to painkillers, such as morphine, including leading Nazi and the head of the Luftwaffe, Hermann Göring. Generally speaking though, the Nazi attitude to drugs were that they were not needed by the Aryan race and were a Jewish ploy to weaken German resolve. Hitler pushed the notion of clean living, being a non-smoking, teetotal vegetarian. But he did enlist the service of a quack doctor by the name of Theodor Morell, who provided Hitler with a cocktail of all manner of narcotics. Morell managed to position himself to successfully treat Hitler for a stomach problem with a mix of probiotics and vitamins. Gaining Hitler's favour, he became part of the inner circle and became a successful businessman, selling his bizarre concoctions to the Nazi elite. Amongst the litany of drugs that Hitler took were cocaine and adrenaline eye drops, bovine testosterone, and amphetamines. German chemical and pharmaceutical companies such as Bayer continued their work on synthesizing new medicines and new drugs. This was nothing new, as German chemists and pharmaceutical companies had dominated during the 19th century and had discovered many new drugs and compounds. Inspired by the production of benzodrine in the United States, German chemists developed their own Wachminen, meaning wake-up agents. Such drugs were used to treat conditions such as depression, apathy, and psychopathic syndromes. But the use of stimulants in other areas were also considered, namely for use in offices, factories, and on the battlefield. This drive led to the creation of Pervitin, a synthesized version of methamphetamine. This drug was made available to the German public in 1938, to even purchase over the counter and without a prescription. It soon became popular with many people, from factory workers during the night shift to office workers that needed an extra boost of confidence to deliver an important meeting, and of course to young people who were looking to party into the early hours. Early research carried out by the chemists concluded that Pervitin had a milder effect than benzodrine but lasted longer. The general conclusion reached by the researchers was that Pervitin was able to increase productivity, increase a person's well-being, whilst also decreasing fatigue. People from all social spheres and classes engaged in taking the drug. Pervitin did have some notable side effects. It could cause hallucinations, seizures, and heart attacks, and it was known to be an addictive substance. One of the key researchers looking to use Pervitin in the military was Otto Friedrich Ranke. Ranke had been a member of the Stahlhelm Freikorps group before it had been incorporated into the SA in 1934. From 1937 until the end of the war, Ranke headed the Institute of General and Military Physiology in Berlin. He conducted research on 19 university students as to the effects of the drug. Ranke studied the effect of Pervitin when compared to a placebo, benzodrine, and caffeine, issuing doses of each to 4 separate groups of students. These students were then made to perform a series of both physical and mental tests. Ranke found that the students given the Pervitin displayed far more stamina, but they made many more mistakes when faced with intellectual activities. Many researchers even self-administered the drug, leading to overwhelming positive reports on the effect of the drug as they felt euphoric. Ranke's findings stressed the importance of Pervitin on exhausted soldiers. However, the military rejected Ranke's goals of large-scale use of the drug. One key reason was that the desired effects of Pervitin would largely depend on the state of mind of the user. The unique biological makeup and the psychological complex of a person gave varied results of Pervitin. By 1939, Pervitin was regulated and required a prescription to purchase. The side effects were becoming more and more well known, as too were the risks of addiction. In March of 1940, Leonardo Conti, the Reich's health leader, issued a warning as to not take Pervitin too often. During the Second World War, some have argued that the drug was vital in the early Nazi victories. One historian has even said, quote, "The German blitzkrieg was powered by amphetamines as much as it was powered by machine." Ranke would also receive updates from German soldiers in Poland as to the use of Pervitin on the front lines. One unit reported that those who took Pervitin were fresh, cheerful, and ready for battle, and all without accident. This despite accounts of some experiencing double vision. Between April and July of 1940, the Wehrmacht and the Luftwaffe purchased some 35 million tablets of Pervitin, along with Isofan, a rival but similar drug. These pills would be issued to fighting soldiers in France, Belgium, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands. But the issuing of Pervitin to soldiers would depend on the individual medical officers and their willingness to dish out the drug. German generals did issue strict orders that soldiers were not to sleep or rest for days at a time. This was in order to achieve the blitzkrieg victories required. The Panzer Group von Kleist was documented for its widespread use of Pervitin to keep troops awake. It was this army group that broke through Ardennes and reached the sea, cutting off a large number of Belgian, French, and British troops. The Allies were unable to understand just how the German army was able to move so quickly. The role of Pervitin in allowing German tank crews to remain awake and keep outmaneuvering the Allies cannot be understated. By not sleeping and not feeling fatigued, soldiers were able to move at tremendous speeds. The successes in France might lead one to think that Pervitin was then issued widely amongst German troops. Despite the Nazis classifying Pervitin as a restrictive substance, on the 1st of July 1941, under the Opium Law, a further 10 million tablets were issued to troops that very same year. But it was never a mandatory drug for soldiers to take. It was issued on a case-by-case basis, as and when the medical officers saw fit, or taken by individual soldiers. There are letters sent by the frontline troops to families, requesting that they send them Pervitin in care packages. There are accounts of Pervitin also being used during defeats. During the Battle of Stalingrad, German soldiers were issued Pervitin in order to attempt breakouts from Soviet encirclement. After the German army surrendered at Stalingrad, there are accounts of soldiers using Pervitin to survive their capture. There was one wounded German soldier who managed to survive a march to a Soviet prisoner camp, walking through deep snows at -38 degrees. This man had little food, save for consuming a couple of tablets of Pervitin. According to the soldier, he said, "Ultimately, I walked as if I was in a trance. My wounded legs just moved automatically. I didn't feel the cold anymore, nor hunger and thirst." Although not everyone who took Pervitin had a positive experience, there are accounts of a senior tank commander fighting in France. He took the drug and suffered a heart attack. The use of Pervitin as a social drug is confirmed in an account of another officer taking Pervitin with alcohol on a stag do. The mix of the drug and alcohol resulted in him dying. There are also accounts of Luftwaffe commanders well aware of the risks of taking the drug, yet they consumed it anyway. According to one fighting in the Battle of Britain, he took Pervitin well aware of the risks, but he could not present as being tired to those soldiers subordinate to him. The risk of taking the drug, when compared to the risk of being shot down, was for the Luftwaffe commander irrelevant. Despite so many people taking the drug, there are only few accounts of soldiers becoming addicted. It would be doctors with readily available and easy access that would end up taking multiple tablets a day. By April of 1941, Pervitin was no longer issued by the military on account of the dangerous side effects. This did not, however, stop individual medical officers and soldiers from gaining access to the drug. As the war became more drawn out, the effectiveness of Pervitin waned. It proved effective in quick blitzkrieg offensives, where soldiers who had taken the drug had the capacity to rest. But in more protracted offensives like in Russia, there was no time to recover from taking Pervitin. What's more, soldiers developed a resilience to the drug, requiring more and more to have any effect. There is one rumour that has persisted around the use of the drug during the Second World War. The term Panzer Schokolade, meaning tank chocolate or armour chocolate, has spread around the internet, notably with an image of something appearing to be a chocolate bar produced by the Zotto company. It should be stated that this is a hoax, though it is quite convincing. There is no evidence to suggest that German tank crews ate meth-infused chocolate. There have been no old wrappers found or first-hand accounts from soldiers, and the Zotto Chocolate Company has published a statement confirming that they had never produced such a product, as the company was also founded in 1999. As discussed previously, German tank crews were given methamphetamine, but not in the form of chocolate. Those who were given meth-infused chocolates were perhaps surprisingly German housewives. Before the war began, the Hinterbrand praline chocolates were produced and advertised to German housewives as a way to make their day's chores more enjoyable. The advertising slogan for this meth-less chocolate was "Always a delight." Just one of these chocolates had double the daily recommended dose of Pervitin, and women were encouraged to eat multiple a day. After the war ended, the drug remained a favoured recreational drug in both West and East Germany. It was even reportedly used as a performance-enhancing drug for the West German athletes in the 1950s. It was not until the 1960s that the company who created the drug stopped supplying the armies of both East and West Germany. Even then, Pervitin remained a potential drug to be administered to West German soldiers until the 1970s. Today, methamphetamines are largely a controlled or illegal substance around the world. Pervitin will remain one of the more disturbing elements of the Second World War. The attempt to push soldiers beyond their limits with methamphetamines to achieve the Nazi goals of domination, whilst also pushing the idea of Aryan supremacy, does highlight the hypocrisy of the ideology. It shows how drugs we now consider dangerous were woven into the fabric of life, seen as normal and a useful tool. Looking back, it can be disturbing to see how such a potent drug was so widely used.